You are listening to Transmigrating into the male supporting character's ex-wife on Galaxxy romance novel, where a transmigrator wakes up in the body of a discarded ex-wife. Ruan Jiu Jiu, once a cannon fodder in the novel, now opens her eyes in a world she doesn't recognize. Divorce papers are already on the table, but will she stay silent and endure, or fight to never be abandoned again? A tale of power, defiance, and a love both subtle and fierce begins right now. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and hit the bell so you won't miss what's next. Let's dive in. On the other side, Ruan Jiu Jiu failed to notice the impending crisis. She was sitting in the back seat playing with her mobile phone, and Lama was telling her to go online to eat chicken. Ruan Jiu Jiu quickly replied, "Wait for me when I get home, you guys play first." Lama, "Okay, then you hurry up." Recently, as soon as she has time, she would eat chicken. Ruan Jiu Jiu almost turned into a weasel too. The game was harmful. Nan would drop Chongjun back along the way, so the driver drove directly to where her home was. The road on both sides gradually became familiar. Ruan Jiu Jiu stuffed her cell phone into her pocket, preparing to stop and get off later. At this moment, a car sped by, brushed up by their side. Without waiting for Ruan Jiu Jiu's reaction, the other party squeezed up suddenly, only to hear a bang. Sitting in the back seat, Ruan Jiu Jiu was not seated firmly, and because of inertia, she fell from her seat with her head first. Even if her head hit a soft cushion, it was still very painful. Ruan Jiu Jiu couldn't help but let out a painful cry. Then she moved very quickly and grabbed the backrest, so as not to suffer a second impact. The driver in the front seat let out a roar in anger. "You sit tight." Ruan Jiu Jiu hurriedly asked, "What's going on?" "That person did it on purpose." The first thing the driver thought of was kidnapping. How could he expect that Su Baiying, who was sitting in another car, was in the mood to die together? The off-road vehicle roared in the dark, turned a corner, and rushed towards them directly. Su Baiying stepped on the accelerator, and there was no room for herself to survive. All that was left in her heart at this moment was boundless hatred. Passers-by screamed in panic. The window opened a gap, blowing her hair wildly. Her eyes were fixed on the opposite vehicle, as if she wanted to pierce Ruan Jiu Jiu, who was sitting in the back seat, through the glass, so that Ruan Jiu Jiu would realize how dangerous it was to anger people off. Su Baiying thought that her life was ruined. Guyu broke off with her, and she also fell out with her family, just because they wanted her to think about it earlier and persuaded her to go on blind dates more often and marry some ordinary people who lived like a pool of stagnant water. Su Baiying's mockery almost overflowed. How could she marry those who are worthless losers? She would rather marry Nangong Aotian, who has nothing but a bit of money, rather than being plain. She told herself from birth that she must have a great love. Whether it was in her previous life or this life, Su Baiying's greatest expectation in her life was her dream marriage. She will step into the marriage hall hand in hand with the one she loves. Whether married by love or married because of money was also good. At least one of the two must be chosen. In the previous life, she was displaced and destitute because she put her bet on Chongjun by mistake. How could she realize that Chongjun was actually Jiaqing's boss? When she thought of her hard life in her previous life that she almost couldn't go on, Chongjun was hard-hearted and ignored her, watching her finally come to death. Su Baiying hated it even more. She hated Chongjun's indifference and even more hated Chongjun's differential treatment. If Chongjun was so indifferent to everyone, perhaps she wouldn't have been so desperate and angry. But when she watched Chongjun reveal his true identity, and let a woman like Ruan Jiu Jiu sit in the seat of Jiaqing's boss, Su Baiying was humiliated as if she was stripped naked in the street, lying naked on the street in shame. It was precisely because this contrast was too strong that Su Baiying feels more and more miserable. Ruan Jiu Jiu, who was imperfect in every way, got the money in Chongjun, and even hooked up with her only hope, Guyu. She was not happy about it. How can it be like this all over again? It was very far from the life she had expected. If this was the case, why would God still let her be born again? Why make her suffer a life experience that was more miserable than her previous life? Watching all the things she should have being snatched almost made her struggle every day in torment. If it hadn't been for Nangong Aotian to completely abandon her, Su Baiying would have not collapsed to such a point. Even that kind of trash dislikes her. When the two quarreled, Su Baiying was so angry that she picked up a fruit knife and stabbed Nangong Aotian. The blade of the knife was not lethal. Su Baiying wanted to kill herself and end this absurd second life completely. This time she thought of Ruan Jiu Jiu. She was unwilling to leave alone by herself. A woman like Ruan Jiu Jiu who was shameless and triumphant was not worthy to live in this world. So she came to the door. The money is mine and the person is mine. Su Baiying let out a hiss that was almost a roar. The two cars were only a few seconds away from colliding. Ruan Jiu Jiu's heart was beating like a drum, and for some reason, a crisis of death that had never engulfed her before made her tremble all over. She heard the driver turning the steering wheel vigorously. She heard the tires squeaking on the asphalt road because of the sudden turn, and the car was thrown aside violently at an unprecedented rate. For a thrilling moment, Chung Jun's face appeared in Ruan Jiu Jiu's mind unexpectedly. She thought if something happens to her, what if Chung Jun has no food to eat? Will he squat in the snow and wait for her to come back just like that time waiting for her all the time? He said, "Don't go." He said, "I like you." He said, "Give me a hug." And she should respond with something better. Bang! It exploded like an explosion at the beginning of the universe. The eardrums couldn't bear the huge buzzing sound, and the body's violent impact made the whole person's nerves slow down. However, in just a few seconds, separated by the long and distant Milky Way, the stars in the sky exploded one after another, turning into the most brilliant and magnificent fireworks in the world, and fell to the ground silently. Who? Ma'am? Ma'am. It was like being stuffed into a big bell and hearing someone ring a Happy New Year. It shook her to the point of dizziness, but she was still incredibly awake. The dead blackness was lifted the moment she opened her eyelids, revealing the color of the roof, and the driver's anxious face was wavering. "Are you okay? I've called an ambulance. Don't be afraid, sir is on his way." Ruan Jiu Jiu blinked her eyes dumbly. "I'm not dead." The driver found a cloth towel to press the wound on Ruan Jiu Jiu's forehead and said carefully, "I'm afraid your forehead is going to be temporarily cracked." It turned out that the splendid ring of the bell was her head hitting hard on the windshield. Ruan Jiu Jiu sluggishly covered the cloth towel on her head, and her whole body was numb as if she had just survived a disaster. Only then did she slow down, and took a long breath of cold air. Her whole body stiffened severely. She asked dumbly, "Are you okay?" The driver's seat was more vulnerable to injury. The driver said, "I'm fine. I turned the steering wheel to avoid it, but the rear of the car was hit, and you were innocently suffered. It's good that it's okay. It's good that it's okay." Ruan Jiu Jiu trembled and sat up straight, and sure enough, there was a coagulated bloodstain on the windshield, which actually looked a bit frightening. If she breaks her appearance, she will break her appearance. She was not a star, and she doesn't live by this face, so it's good to be alive. For a moment, Ruan Jiu Jiu almost thought that she was going to die, and maybe go back to another world. That's right. Where's the culprit? The driver pointed to a place behind Ruan Jiu Jiu. It hit a wall. It's a woman. She's already unconscious. Woman. Ruan Jiu Jiu had a bad premonition. "I'll go down and have a look." "Ma'am." It's okay. I'm just a little dizzy at the moment. It's not a problem." The driver carefully helped her out of the car. There were some passers-by and people eating melons around the scene of the car accident, and they were pointing at them. The driver hit the brakes to the middle of the road, and the rear of the car was severely damaged. If it really hit face to face, she might be smashed into meatloaf. Ruan Jiu Jiu looked at Su Baiying's car with lingering fear. The black off-road vehicle hit the wall, broken glass was scattered everywhere, and the crust of the broken parts flew to the side. One can imagine how fast the opponent was. Ruan Jiu Jiu walked slowly to the front of the wrecked car. The front of the car was twisted and deformed, and the woman sitting in the driver's seat was covered with blood, tightly stuck in the driver's seat. Her life or death was uncertain. The face was sallow and bleakly gray, and the broken windshield made a few cuts on her face, making it more shocking. Su Baiying's life was completely finished. Her crimes were enough for her to be sentenced. Even if she spends money to get out, deliberately murdering Jiaqing's boss wife will definitely expose everything about her to the world, and be hyped over and over again, making her restless for the rest of her life. Ruan Jiu Jiu vaguely remembered how Su Baiying was described in the story. It was said that she was not so simple because she had experienced family changes in her early years, and she was more eager than ordinary people in the pursuit of emotion and a place to call home. But at that time the story was already in the late stages and Ruan Jiu Jiu, who wanted to complain about the author's forced twist at the time, had already collapsed to the point of no return. From the very beginning, Su Baiying's life was destined to be full of infinite uncertainty and the possibility of easy failure. She puts her life on others, so she had to endure such consequences. Her future was not closely tied to herself, but to the man with who she gambled. Ruan Jiu Jiu remembered that at that time she had only one feeling after reading the entire book. Su Baiying grew up with no special talents. Whether it was pursuing Chongjun or keeping Guyu, she had always been disconnected from society. She didn't have any hobbies, and her friends were also working hard on marrying a good man and giving her tips. She didn't like to work. She just wants to be a full-time wife. She wants to give her husband the utmost tenderness and gentleness like a doddering flower, and she will be the woman behind a successful man, always supporting each other gently and tenderly. Despite the male protagonist in the story will never divorce, and will always love each other, and never give up. Ruan Jiu Jiu couldn't help thinking about how long Su Baiying, who had nothing to do with Guyu's life, could last for a marriage with him without any common language except for his parents. If they divorce one day, would she still have the courage to live? Now it seems, Su Baiying may not be as indestructible as she herself said. Looking at her miserable appearance, Ruan Jiu Jiu didn't know what to say for a while, just sighed for a long time. Behind her, the sound of the 120 ambulance and the horn of the police car sounded, as if to say the words about future, hope, and beautifulness were gradually fading away from Su Baiying's next life. Among the noisy crowd, many people were confused, watching and recording videos and posting them on various social networks. It was so chaotic that the noise almost drowned out the siren of the police cars. Ruan Jiu Jiu stood aside and watched as the paramedics carefully rescued the unconscious Su Baiying and carried her onto a stretcher. At this moment, a figure quickly passed through the crowd and ran towards Ruan Jiu Jiu. That figure was Chongjun. Ruan Jiu Jiu stood on the spot and was a little sad. For a while, she didn't know what she was thinking. When she raised her head, she had crushed into a familiar embrace. She staggered back and took a step back to stand firmly. Then she came back to her senses with a surprised expression. Chongjun. Chongjun was not as calm and collected as usual. His breathing was heavy, and his chest was rising and falling sharply. Ruan Jiu Jiu's cheeks were pressed against his clothes, and through the soft fabric, she could hear the strong beating of his heart. He didn't say a word, but when he hugged Ruan Jiu Jiu tightly, his arms trembled. When her fingers touched the clothes on his back, he was surprisingly wet with sweat, and there was steaming heat all over his body. It was obvious that he had run very fast on the way, so he had such a situation. Ruan Jiu Jiu was strangled and almost couldn't breathe. Her eyes turned red, and she felt a little bit of lingering fear from Chongjun's reaction. It was rare that she was hugged tightly by Chongjun without resistance. The noise next to her ears continued and did not stop. The reporters who heard the wind and came wanted to grab the first-hand information to report. Fortunately, the police had enough manpower, and Jiaqing's staff were also present, which prevented Ruan Jiu Jiu from falling into another public opinion storm. Ruan Jiu Jiu got into another ambulance. Chongjun didn't say a word the whole time but just held her hands. His fingers were stiff and strong, and Ruan Jiu Jiu felt a bit painful when he held them. Su Baiying was sent to the ICU for emergency treatment, and Ruan Jiu Jiu had a full body examination, and the results would be available soon. Fortunately, there was only a slight concussion, and it would not be a problem after taking a rest for a few days. The wound on her forehead was covered with gauze, with a little stinging sensation, and there were a few drops of blood on her clothes, which made Ruan Jiu Jiu look miserable. She sat on the hospital bed and was silent with Chongjun for a long time, before whispering, Actually, there is nothing wrong. It was too much to do a full body examination, and Ruan Jiu Jiu felt bad about wasting money. Chongjun glanced at her, and when his slender eyes stared at Ruan Jiu Jiu, his eyes were dark and heavy, and he looked strangely scary without carelessness, which made Ruan Jiu Jiu suddenly embarrassed, and her arrogance in the face of Chongjun instantly disappeared. Okay, let's check if you want to check. I'll just treat it as the year-end physical examination for this year. The police acted quickly and immediately retrieved the car records of the two vehicles. With the mentality of dying together, Su Baiying naturally never thought of removing the car recorder. The things exposed in the video this night were enough to teach her a lesson that she will never forget for a lifetime. A policeman knocked on the door and walked in to take a statement. Ruan Jiu Jiu truthfully informed the other party of her whereabouts. After the police wrote it down seriously, he frowned and said, "Why is she doing this?" Ruan Jiu Jiu asked, "What's the matter?" She stabbed a man before driving away to commit murder. The man had been living with her for many days and is currently resuscitating in another hospital. Most importantly, during the emergency treatment just now, it was found that she was carrying a child in her stomach, but unfortunately, she had a miscarriage, and the father of the child is most likely this man. Ruan Jiu Jiu was stunned for a moment and then muttered to herself, "Could it be Nangong Aotian, the child's biological father? It was absolutely impossible to be Guyu. Anyway, we will take care of the rest, so please don't worry. Mr. Chung, can you come out for a moment?" Under Ruan Jiu Jiu's puzzled eyes, Chung Jun followed the police out the door, and the two stood in the corridor. The police then continued. The suspect's family hopes to settle everything out of court, and said that they will do everything they can to remedy the situation. Mr. Chung, you. No need. He interrupted the policeman abruptly. Chung Jun's tone was slow, but it made people hear a bit of anger that was hidden behind indifference and rationality and had not been dispelled. They'd better not be self-defeating. 3. Okay, I see. I will convey your words. After the police left, there was another deadly silence in the single-room ward. Ruan Jiu Jiu sat for a while with her head lowered, the hair was scattered on her temples. Chung Jun walked into the door, and his expression returned to normal. He held Ruan Jiu Jiu's hand and asked, "Does it still hurt?" "Ah, it's okay." If it wasn't for his hand tugging her tightly, Ruan Jiu Jiu would have thought that Chung Jun had already regained his composure. Her palms were sweaty and the wet feeling made Ruan Jiu Jiu a little awkward. But at this moment, she had no intention of withdrawing. Instead, she seemed to be comforting Chung Jun. She was obviously injured, but Chung Jun reacted more obviously than she did. "Actually, at that moment I was very afraid that I would die." His gaze turned to her suddenly. "I thought I couldn't see you anymore." Ruan Jiu Jiu's slightly awkward and aggrieved confession made Chung Jun feel a little untimely joy. The long wait finally got a response. How could he be not happy? Without waiting for Ruan Jiu Jiu's reaction, he hugged her tightly in his arms. He said softly, "No, it won't be impossible to see me." Knock, knock, knock. The knock on the door, accompanied by an eager voice, jumped in through the door. "Sister-in-law. Sister-in-law, you're okay." Tu Nan moved very fast and rushed to the hospital after dealing with the turmoil after the accident. Although the driver immediately explained that Ruan Jiu Jiu was only slightly injured, Tu Nan would never forget Chung Jun's expression and reaction at that time. He was simply terrified, and the first thing he did after he was done was rush over to visit. Sister-in-law. Tu Nan pushed open the door recklessly, but what he saw was the boss holding his sister-in-law tightly in his arms. The boss's death stare made Tu Nan realize that he probably maybe came at the wrong time again. Tu Nan scratched his head awkwardly. "As long as there is no problem." The atmosphere was broken, and Ruan Jiu Jiu couldn't continue talking anymore. However, their time was still long, and they were not in a hurry at this moment. Ruan Jiu Jiu called out to Tu Nan and thanked him for coming. Although Tu Nan was a little reckless, his worries were all because of her safety. "Feels good to be thought of," Ruan Jiu Jiu said very seriously. "Thank you." Tu Nan was stunned for a moment, then blushed for the first time in the world and said embarrassedly, "Why is my sister-in-law so serious all of a sudden? I'm not used to it." "It's good that it's okay, it's good that it's okay." Ruan Jiu Jiu rarely saw his thin-skinned appearance, so she couldn't help laughing. Tu Nan's face turned even redder, so he spared no effort in complimenting. "Sister-in-law, you are so good-looking, and you are so good-looking even after breaking your face." Ruan Jiu Jiu, Chung Jun. He was usually a dog-like person. When it was time to praise her, his words became sourer and sour. Tu Nan realized that the situation was getting worse and worse. He coughed dryly and quickly changed the subject. "By the way, Fu Zicheng is there for the rest of the matter. You can do what you want to do with this matter, and the murderer won't be able to escape punishment." "Then thank you so much." Just as they were talking, there was another knock on the door. The door was pushed open, and it was Guyu who came. He came from the company in a hurry, and he had to avoid the paparazzi. His clothes were messy and hurried. He came in with big strides, and by a glance he first determined Ruan Jiu Jiu's situation, and after making sure she was okay, he was finally able to relax his nerves. Gu Yu smiled wryly, and shame was exposed in his eyes. "I'm sorry, it's too late to apologize at this point. It was my problem that caused you such big trouble. After this matter is resolved, I will submit my resignation to the personnel department. In my name, I swear that Su Baiying will never have the opportunity to do anything to hurt you again. Please don't say that." Gu Yu was always habitually taking everything on his own. Seeing that he didn't even want to work anymore, Ruan Jiu Jiu hurriedly interrupted him. "There are some inexplicable misunderstandings and conflicts between me and Su Baiying, but these things have nothing to do with you, and they have nothing to do with other people too, so please don't blame yourself." Gu Yu was stunned for a moment, thinking that Ruan Jiu Jiu was comforting him, and he pulled his lips bitterly. "Nevertheless, it's my responsibility for her to get to where she is today. I shouldn't have left her out of anger, which leads her to an irreversible path now." Hearing Gu Yu's words, Ruan Jiu Jiu's eyebrows wrinkled tighter and tighter. "I didn't expect you to have such an idea. Have you instigated her? Have you ever did have a wrong suggestion?" Gu Yu was about to explain, but Ruan Jiu Jiu rushed to speak again. "Adults should be prepared to bear the consequences of their own decisions. It's better to hurt someone if I can't have the one I like. Did you instill such values in her? If not, why do you take other people's responsibility? How good are you?" Gu Yu was left speechless by Ruan Jiu Jiu's series of responses. Ruan Jiu Jiu stood up with a serious expression that had never been seen before, and even with a little bit of hatred. She stared straight at Gu Yu's dodging eyes and slowed down. "It is precisely because you always want to take responsibility for her that she has a fluke mentality, making her think that she will have someone to bear the burden behind her. Gu Yu, we are all adults, everyone is an independent individual. There are too many things that have nothing to do with you, such as now." The ward was silent. Gu Yu stood there dumbfounded, not knowing what to say for a while. At such a serious moment, Tu Nan couldn't suppress his heart, and whispered a confession. "Sister-in-law is so handsome. Ruan Jiu Jiu." Gu Yu blinked his eyes slowly, recalling what Ruan Jiu Jiu said to him carefully. After a long time, he let out a sigh of relief. "Thank you. Although I may not be able to do it yet, but I will be responsible for myself." "That's good." Ruan Jiu Jiu took out the demeanor of a lady boss. "Continue to work tomorrow, otherwise, your bonus will be deducted." Gu Yu laughed along. "By the way, on Su Baiying's side," Gu Yu said, "I don't know, I haven't had time to go there." The first thing he did was went to Ruan Jiu Jiu's ward immediately, making sure that she was fine before he could feel at ease. Looking at the hands of the two people who had been holding tightly since he entered the ward, Gu Yu's eyes flickered a few times. Saying that there was no loss in his heart would be a lie, but he was already adjusting his mentality so that he could hurry up and get over this period of unfulfilled emotion. At this time, the policeman who had just taken the statement walked in, saw a few more people in the room. He was stunned for a moment and said, "Miss Su is already awake, do you want to go and see her?" "Then I'll go over and see Su Baiying," Gu Yu said. By the way, she also hopes to have Ms. Ruan at the scene when she takes the statement. The policeman's voice just fell, and several people looked at each other. Ruan Jiu Jiu's eyes met Chang Jun's subconsciously. Chang Jun held her hand firmly, signaling her to feel at ease. Ruan Jiu Jiu took her hand back, pursed her lips and smiled. "Then I'll go too." This can be considered as the end of her bad relationship with Su Baiying. References Su Baiying, who was lying on the hospital bed, had calmed down. There were several policemen. Standing beside them were Su Baiying's family members. Once they saw Ruan Jiu Jiu, several people were in tears, as if they would rather kneel and beg for mercy, and asked Ruan Jiu Jiu to forgive Su Baiying. Being so troubled by them made it seem like Ruan Jiu Jiu was deceiving others and wanted to use power to bully others, and that Su Baiying was the real victim. Seeing Gu Yu rushing forward as if he had seen a loved one, Gu Yu was so busy that he persuaded them to leave with good words. But with red eyes, they said that they wouldn't leave. Su Baiying was laying on the hospital bed, her face numb as if her family's behavior had nothing to do with her. The doctor began to stop them. "Don't be noisy, the ward needs to be quiet. The patient has just been rescued, and it is not good for her health to continue making a noise like this. Gu Yu also said, "You better be calmed down first, let's go out and talk, and now we have to start making a statement." When they heard that they were going to make a statement, a middle-aged woman who was suspected to be Su Baiying's mother cried even more. "Aoying is a pure and kind child, Gu Yu, don't misunderstand, she has a bad temper, but she absolutely can't do anything to hurt others. Get out." Chung Jun's voice was not loud but very clear. As soon as his words came out, the room became quiet in an instant. Su Baiying's mother's face showed a little embarrassment, but she still wanted to use the usual meekness and subservience act, prostrate, to dispel Jiaqing's boss' anger. "I'm a mother of a child and in my heart." Chung Jun's gaze turned in the direction of Su Baiying's mother, causing her to be silent for a few seconds. Tu Nan took a step forward with a cold smile. "Auntie, you probably still don't understand the seriousness of your daughter's crimes. I advise you to go out to blow off some steam and calm down, so as not to let your daughter sit in jail for a few more years for nothing because of your words and actions, which is not very worthwhile, right?" Aye. She had never seen such a scene, but after a few tosses and turns, facing their cold stare, she felt awkward for a while. Gu Yu sighed. "Auntie, if you keep making trouble, you will only harm Baiying." It didn't take long for the room to return to silence. Su Baiying was lying quietly on the bed. Her mental state at this time was quite good, but her eyes were full of hostility when she looked at anyone, especially when she saw Ruan Jiu Jiu. She wanted to jump up and choke Ruan Jiu Jiu immediately. "You're here," Su Baiying said hoarsely. Ruan Jiu Jiu stood in front of the hospital bed, looked down at her and said, "You wanted to see me? Oh, there's something I would like to talk to you alone later." When Su Baiying dropped these words, she could clearly feel how Ruan Jiu Jiu was being protected by several people faintly, as if she, the person lying on the hospital bed, was a wolf and a leopard. She sneered angrily and said, "I've already confessed, what are you guys afraid of? I can't eat her." Even though he already expected the outcome, Gu Yu still showed sadness. "Baiying, you shouldn't have. You are so stupid." Su Baiying's eyes were also red. After she woke up from a coma after failing to die, she was full of unwillingness and exhaustion when she learned that Ruan Jiu Jiu was only slightly injured. Immediately afterward, the doctor regretfully informed her that her child could not be saved. Su Baiying's first reaction was astonishment. She did not expect that she would be pregnant with a child. She had slept with Nangong Aotian only a handful of times, and each time was an unpleasant memory. Unexpectedly, she had been pregnant with a child, who had already died without her even knowing. Su Baiying touched her lower abdomen and covered her cheek with one hand, not knowing if she wanted to cry or laugh. Why was her fate so bleak? She still can't figure it out. Nangong Aotian was being treated in another hospital, and was in stable condition. The next time they will meet again, I'm afraid it will be in court. Su Baiying said slowly in a hoarse voice, "I admit defeat. It was my bad luck, I was not careful enough and I have to pay a huge price. No matter how you spectators torture me, I will accept it. Don't you understand?" Ruan Jiu Jiu sighed softly. "No one wants your life, and no one wants to hurt you on purpose. No one tried to hurt me on purpose, only to take away something that belongs to me." Su Baiying stared hard at Ruan Jiu Jiu. "You already have enough, don't pretend to be a good person in front of me. What did I take away from you?" Ruan Jiu Jiu asked. "My Gu Yu. My Chung Jun. You took them all away, take them away." Su Baiying screamed hoarsely, tears streaming down the corners of her eyes. "They should have been mine." As soon as she said that, except for Ruan Jiu Jiu, several people in the room agreed that Su Baiying had gone crazy. Forget about Gu Yu, what's going on with staring at someone else's husband, and what kind of thing was related to Chung Jun? Even Gu Yu's expression became unsightly. Gu Yu said, "Baiying, I belong to me, I am not your property. The same goes for others." But before Ruan Jiu Jiu appeared, you loved me, didn't you? It was her appearance that stole you away, right? Gu Yu was silent, unwilling to break her fantasy. In fact, from the very beginning, his feelings for Su Baiying were only like a family affection and a responsibility that could not be shied away. Their previous relationship stemmed more from the burden of their parents, yet they had to make him responsible for the rest of his life. Gu Yu's silence caused Su Baiying to feel uneasy. She waited for a reply, but saw Gu Yu's expression. All the emotions on his face were not what she wanted to see. Her blood gradually became cold, and the heat in her limbs gradually retreated, making her feel chills. Brother Yu, you liked me, right? Su Baiying asked cautiously. Brother Yu, you liked me, right? Su Baiying asked cautiously. Gu Yu just remained silent. In this matter he couldn't even lie. After a long time he just said in a low voice, I'm sorry. If he doesn't like her, he doesn't like her, and there is no way to force things. Su Baiying, who was still struggling with the situation along with Gu Yu's apology, finally fell heavily into emptiness, shattering her only remaining obsession and pride into nothing. There was a somewhat stiff smile squeezed out of her face, but a mournful whimper came from her throat. From beginning to end she actually had not been loved by anyone. She froze and stared at Gu Yu blankly. Gu Yu turned his face away with an apologetic look. She looked at Chang Jun, who never said a word from beginning to end. His eyes barely looked at her, just like in her previous life. No matter how hard she worked, she couldn't get those eyes to look at her properly for once. Su Baiying asked softly, why won't the people I like me? Because love does not rely on brute force in pursuing, but mutual attraction does. Ruan Jiu Jiu's voice was calm as she stated the truth. If you don't even love yourself, how can others fall in love with you? Su Baiying's lips trembled, and after a while she seemed to be lost in thought and said, I really hate you. Su Baiying confessed to her crimes. She had given up on her life, and Ruan Jiu Jiu only hopes that she can learn something from it so that she will not start over in vain in this life. When they were about to leave the ward, Su Baiying called out to Ruan Jiu Jiu. I have a few things that I want to say to you alone. Chang Jun took hold of Ruan Jiu Jiu's arm and brought it towards his direction. Ruan Jiu Jiu put her arm around him soothingly and shook her head. It's all right, just a few words. Su Baiying was weak at the moment, not to mention wanting to harm others. Even raising her arms would be sore and tiring, and she couldn't harm anyone at all. Chang Jun said, half a minute. Ruan Jiu Jiu laughed. Okay, half a minute is half a minute. Only Su Baiying and Ruan Jiu Jiu were left in the ward. In order to avoid accidents, Ruan Jiu Jiu was more than a meter away from her. Su Baiying snorted coldly and said, I would love to bite you if you were closer to me. I still have the strength. Don't, my meat is not delicious. Ruan Jiu Jiu's expression was sincere. Su Baiying ignored her joke and continued to ask coldly, Are you proud of yourself now? Why should I be proud? I finally figured out that this was a good idea of killing two birds with one stone. Break into Jiaqing, make yourself the second boss of Jiaqing, and develop your relationship with Gu Yu at the same time. When Chang Jun dies, you can inherit Jiaqing openly and in an honest way. In a few years you can be with Gu Yu rightfully. I really want to applaud you, but I can't figure you out. What? Su Baiying looked at Ruan Jiu Jiu's pale face and frowned. What? Why do you think Chang Jun will die? Su Baiying was stunned for a moment, and immediately she laughed. Her laughter was unrestrained and smug. I didn't expect you to be reborn earlier than me. Chang Jun will die and he will be killed by others. Now that I think about it, I also realize that it should be his business competitor. This is his ending. Do you think that you can change a lot of things, even his death? Su Baiying sneered. Fine, then you'll live in fear every day. I advise you not to fall in love with him, otherwise, you will be asking for trouble. Others left the ward one after another, but Gu Yu didn't see Su Baiying's parents. He looked back and forth that he almost bumped into a nurse. The little nurse was young, with a round apple face, petite stature, and a pair of beautiful almond eyes that couldn't be moved after she looked at Gu Yu. As if destined to meet, the two stared blankly at each other. Gu Yu came back to his senses and said politely, This lady. You are Gu Yu. The little nurse couldn't help but leap for joy, her face flushed. What a coincidence, I didn't expect to see a real person. Gu Yu thought it was his powder too, but the other party said very quickly, You maybe don't remember me. I'm not only your fan, but I also played games with you on the server. Do you remember like a dream? I'm also in Changyuetage's gang, and I have a good relationship with Bai Longma and the others. You played with me a few times, and you have also complimented my skills. A series of narratives made him stunned, and then Gu Yu, who had an excellent memory, immediately remembered that there was indeed such a person back then. It was rare to see a girl with such good skills, so he casually said a few words of praise, but Su Baiying took it seriously. She cried and made trouble for several days. He followed Su Baiying's request to remove each other as friends, and in a few days later, this girl quit the gang. At this time, he faintly thought that the girl decision to quit might also be related to Su Baiying. Speaking of the game, the little nurse's expression became a little sadder, as if thinking of some not-so-good past. The nurse at the other end of the corridor called her name. She responded crisply, put on her mask and said quickly, "It's too rare to see you. By the way, I got a place for the beta test of Ode to Gallantry, and my game ID is Little Fairy. Can you take me with you if you don't have enough people to play in the group?" Guyu was stunned. Okay? The nurse at the other end of the corridor called her name again. She waved her. The girl, hand hastily, jogged off and disappeared into the corner of the hallway. After a long while, Guyu couldn't help but smile. What's the matter with him? He's like a young boy. Ruan Jiu Jiu couldn't be sure whether what Su Baiying said was true. The book's plot tells that after the female lead's rebirth, she follows her childhood friend wholeheartedly, and never mentioned any matters about her white moonlight June. Therefore, Ruan Jiu Jiu was naturally unclear about Jun's future. At that moment, as if the dust had settled, the goddess of fate knocked on the top of her head with a spindle, and laughed maliciously, and her head became dizzy and a little dazed. Ruan Jiu Jiu was not timid on the surface. At this point, whenever she, RJJ, showed a half-fragile expression, Su Baiying would determine it as her RJJ falling from grace. Miss Su Baiying, I don't understand what you're talking about. Ruan Jiu Jiu raised her lips inconspicuously. You believe in things that are contrary to your wishes, and you didn't get the results you wanted, so things happened. There is always time for everyone, and everyone can't avoid it. Just like when you wanted to die with me, I didn't expect I would get out of the car alive. 4. So you think Jun can avoid it? Su Baiying mockingly laughed. Ruan Jiu Jiu, I believe that he is the main character in this world, so he shouldn't die. Su Baiying's mocking smile froze at the corner of her lips. If you have time to intimidate me, it's better to reflect more and think about how to spend a long and tormenting time in prison. Su Baiying clenched her fists. Although she was completely exhausted, she still tried her best to say loudly, I won't regret it. Ruan Jiu Jiu just looked at her with a knowing gaze. Really? After the brief conversation between the two ended, Ruan Jiu Jiu walked out of the ward, and Su Baiying's body, which was still holding up just now, lost its strength and collapsed on the hospital bed. Her eyes fell on the pale ceiling, her complexion was gray and blue, and there was no trace of the spirited self-confidence that had just been reborn. Guyu's disappointed eyes appeared in her expo mind, her family's sadness and disbelief, Nangong Outyan's horror, and finally, the doctor's sympathetic sigh. The child is gone. Did she just have a young life in her belly for a short time? Su Baiying's hand slowly moved from the bed to her cold lower abdomen. She held back the long-lost tears welling up in her eyes. After a long time, her lips hummed, and she made a sound as low as a mosquito. I don't regret it. She couldn't regret it either. Su Baiying's words were like a seed, which quickly took root and sprouted in a corner of Ruan Jiu Jiu's heart, blooming into a hazy flower. She saw Jun wearing a pink Hello Kitty apron, and was washing dishes with his back on Ruan Jiu Jiu, which made Ruan Jiu Jiu even more uncomfortable. This feeling of uncertainty was too bad, and it was also impossible to know the truth. Just as when Ruan Jiu Jiu was thinking about how to proceed to the next step, Jun suddenly turned around and slowly asked, Have I eaten too much today? Ruan Jiu Jiu. Because you're angry. Ruan Jiu Jiu. You think I'm that kind of person? Jun replied without hesitation. Yes. Ruan Jiu Jiu ground her teeth. I advise you to talk less. Jun. Sure enough, you're still angry. Ruan Jiu Jiu. Jun had this ability which made her, who was not angry at all, be provoked into anger in just a few words. Ruan Jiu Jiu gave him a frustrated look. Hey, let me ask you, are there many companies that regard jiaqing as a thorn in their side? He took out a bottle of Yakult from the refrigerator, opened the cap and said slowly, Not much, just a dozen. Ruan Jiu Jiu was speechless. A dozen is not too much? If all of them joined hands, it would be enough to kill him many times. Have you ever thought that maybe they will do something against you? Just like what Su Baiying did to me. Ruan Jiu Jiu asked in a very subtle way, trying to help Chung Jun find some negative factors so that he could come up with ways to avoid danger. Chung Jun held the Yakult. His eyes turned to Ruan Jiu Jiu and stared at Ruan Jiu Jiu uncomfortably before he continued. Did she say something to you? Ruan Jiu Jiu avoided his gaze and said vaguely, probably because I almost died once and felt something in my heart. Su Baiying thought she was reborn because Su Baiying had not had close contact with her and didn't know her at all. Other people are different, especially Chung Jun, who saw her changes before and after. For ordinary people who would have thought that it was a change of soul, Ruan Jiu Jiu wanted to keep this matter from Chung Jun forever, and naturally, she was reluctant to mention anything related to it. Don't think too much. I'm not Steve Jobs one. Even if I die, Tu Nan and the others will still be able to stand up. Jiaqing has an increasingly successful mode of operation, and if there is a missing piece of the foundation, it will be filled soon. At this time it's better to improve one's strength, or simply do something underhand and poach designers or programmers. Only then would it be maximizing the interests of businessmen. If they want to use the murder of others just to smoothen the future of their company, they are either stupid or foolish. Ruan Jiu Jiu. Oh, but thinking about it, the core idea of a company as big as Jiaqing is not run by only one person. Yet then again, for Tu Nan and the others, Chung Jun was also the same figure as the core of leadership. He, CJ, said that it was not important, but he was an irreplaceable existence. Ruan Jiu Jiu's expression was serious. After thinking for a long time, she suddenly thought that maybe Chung Jun was not killed by a business competitor. Perhaps eating junk food until his body collapses, being too lazy to go to the hospital with a cold fever, and dying at home, long-term unhealthy routine and diet cause the body to become cancerous, all of which were quite reasonable. She couldn't help but feel embarrassed. When she looked at Chung Jun again, she realized that it was not easy for Chung Jun to be able to live to this day with such lazy behavior. Chung Jun. He didn't know why, but he always had a sense of foreboding. Ruan Jiu Jiu stood up under his gaze. From today onwards, protect your body, cherish your life and eat and rest as much as you can. Chung Jun. Question mark. Okay, in order to prevent you from dying too quickly, it's better to go to bed early. Ruan Jiu Jiu pushed him towards the study. Chung Jun reluctantly glanced at the dried fruits and snacks on the table, and Ruan Jiu Jiu's serious eyes glared back at him. Go to sleep. Young people should not stay up all night. Chung Jun. My snacks. Bang. The door was closed by Ruan Jiu Jiu with a bang, and through the door panel, Ruan Jiu Jiu said slyly, if I find that the snacks on the table are missing, you will eat nothing tomorrow. Ruan Jiu Jiu slept restlessly. She tossed and turned, and the scenes in her dream were messy. One moment showed the events of this world, and another moment showed Su Baiying's memory of her previous life. The two repeatedly crossed and finally became a mess. She turned over, still frowning in her sleep as if she was sleeping uneasily. A slap on the bed head made a crisp and clear sound. In the dark living room, a slowly moving figure stopped immediately because of the loud noise that came from Ruan Jiu Jiu's bedroom. It was actually Chung Jun. In the middle of the night, he appeared in the living room. Besides stealing food was the only reason. After a long time there was no scolding coming from Ruan Jiu Jiu. So, he continued to move silently to the kitchen. The soda in the refrigerator was gone, and the instant noodles in the cabinet were gone. Chung Jun looked around, not to mention sausages, he didn't even see the plastic wrapper. He silently moved from the kitchen to the living room and sat on the sofa. There were snacks and dried fruits on the table. Chung Jun stretched out his hand, picked up a bag of dried meat as usual, and was about to tear it apart when Ruan Jiu Jiu's serious warning came to his mind. Chung Jun was silent for a moment. Sacrificing lunch for a bag of snacks and eating a big pot of rice in the cafeteria would not be worth it. Fortunately, there was still a small secret base. Ruan Jiu Jiu, on the spur of the moment, must have forgotten that there was something under the sofa. Chung Jun spread his legs apart, bowed down and put his hand under the sofa, but he didn't touch anything. Just when he thought that the snacks were all confiscated, Chung Jun's fingertips touched a puffed food bag, and he gently pulled it out with his fingertips. It turned out to be an empty bag. The flashlight hit the bottom of the sofa, and it turned out that there really was nothing. The empty bag that was left behind seemed to be evidence of Ruan Jiu Jiu's mockery of him. On the one hand it was a warning to him, and on the other hand it was to make him totally down. Chung-jun sat on the sofa motionless. In the dark living room he clasped his hands together, stared at the empty bag for a long time, and let out a sigh. Ugh. Tunan noticed that recently, his boss' routine was unusually regular. He Tien often stayed up late at night to work, and he sometimes sent a few work-related messages to his boss, and he CJ would not respond until the next morning. The snacks in the boss's drawer were gone, and the boss's daily must-have drink was replaced with plain water. One day when Tunan sent him CJ a message, the boss actually said that he was going for a morning run and had no time. Morning run? Are you sure he's a working adult and not a well-behaved high school student? Tunan's shock quickly spread in the small circle. Whenever Chung-jun failed to reply to his message in time, Tunan and Fu Zicheng would chat meaningfully in the group chat. Off for another morning run. No, it's late at this hour, probably taking a nap. Eat a healthy meal, the kind that doesn't have gutter oil. Ha 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 ha, the boss had worked hard. Tunan had been removed from the group chat. Fu Zicheng had been removed from the group chat. Jiao Fan had been removed from the group chat. The most shocking thing about Tunan is that he and Chung-jun had known each other since they were students. At that time, Chung-jun was notorious for not liking to be restrained. He couldn't be found for 3 days or 2. Even the dean of the school came to persuade him to participate in the competition. He said he wouldn't go, without giving face to anyone. Just like that, Chung-jun became the first placer from the first to third year of high school, and he was always holding a steady lead over the second placer, Tunan. Tunan also asked him if he, CJ, didn't want to be in the limelight, why didn't he take the test a little lower? 1. Chung-jun held the book in one hand, gave him a sideways glance, and said calmly that it was too troublesome. If you make a mistake you will be scolded, you will be called to the office, you will need to write a copy as punishment, you will be scolded when you leave the classroom, and maybe your parents will get called. Students with excellent grades were privileged, and it can only be said that Tunan was not good enough, and he was not capable of taking first place in the exam. Chung-jun, the flower of high mountains in the minds of students and teachers, suddenly raised his head at this moment and asked in a serious and slow tone, "How did you get it wrong with such a simple question?" Tunan. Email protected T3. Tunan was depressed. Tunan had gone from being the proud son of heaven praised by everyone to Chung-jun's little sidekick since then. He figured that following Chung-jun was definitely worthwhile, boasting how cool teaming up would be. Sure enough, Tunan went to the same university with Chung-jun, started a business together, and started a company together, and watched the small company rise at a speed that shocked the industry. He was really convinced by Chung-jun and decided that his future career should be unilaterally bound to Chung-jun. Even when the momentum was at its best, he never thought of starting his own business. He said to someone that he was willing to be Boss Cheng's lapdog alone. A lapdog or something, and says it's for life. It's got to be email protected, for life. Now seeing Chung-jun being disciplined as if he had gone to a fully integrated middle school, Tunan was a little worried at first, for fear that the boss would be impatient, and that he would quarrel with his sister-in-law, even though Tunan's brain had not been able to outline what kind of scene will Chung-jun's quarreling would be like. During lunch, Tunan planned to go over to see how the boss was doing recently. Turning the corner, he saw his sister-in-law and the boss standing face to face in the corridor from a distance. Ruan Jiu Jiu raised her head and said, "Did you follow my instructions?" Chung-jun. "I want to." Ruan Jiu Jiu. "No, you don't want to." Chung-jun. It was reasonable that at times like this, Chung-jun would not say a word, and wouldn't even bother to pay attention to people. Tunan stuck his head out cautiously. Chung-jun was taller than Ruan Jiu Jiu's relatively petite stature. He CJ put his hands in his pockets and listened to Ruan Jiu Jiu's words. His face was expressionless, and he tried to resist Ruan Jiu Jiu's fascist dictatorship with silence. This time Tunan really saw Chung-jun's expression clearly. From the outsider's point of view, Chung-jun's unflattering face appears to be not very happy. Tunan had been following Chung-jun for so many years, and he knows a lot about Chung-jun. Boss Cheng's face was not half reluctant. Being disciplined by Ruan Jiu Jiu, he was too good to be true. With a reluctant look on the surface when in fact, he was in his best mood. The last time Tunan saw Chung-jun's expression was when the first game developed by the company was a great success. To Nan. Using a slightly obscene and inappropriate word to describe Boss Chung at the moment. He is secretly happy. Yes. No, Chung Jun was being disciplined so strictly, why is he happy? The single dog To Nan stared blankly at Chung Jun following behind Ruan Jiu Jiu. The two entered the office one after the other, and the door was closed. In his mind, their student days emerged again. Chung Jun's warm and beautiful face showed no expression, pointing to a big math problem that To Nan had intended to ask him, CJ, to teach for the whole year. You don't even know this? Not even that. None of them? No? This question was so difficult. Single dogs don't know how to do it. Ruan Jiu Jiu, who was sitting in the office, suddenly turned her head and looked back and forth in confusion. Strange, why do I seem to hear a dog barking? We can't keep dogs in the company, right? Chung Jun calmly ate his omelet. You heard wrong. Yes, maybe. Because of that, Ruan Jiu Jiu was a little embarrassed. Actually, it's okay to eat snacks occasionally, but it's better to drink more plain water and drink less. Chung Jun calmly stole a piece of chicken from Ruan Jiu Jiu's lunchbox. Okay. Ruan Jiu Jiu? Do you think I am blind? In order to praise Chung Jun for his recent performance, Ruan Jiu Jiu decided to buy him a few cupcakes. Because it was a surprise, of course, Ruan Jiu Jiu couldn't say it. She had already planned to go out after her nap later. She didn't know when Chung Jun had walked up silently from behind. He was wearing a thin black down jacket with a sweater under it today, and his fingers were cold. Ruan Jiu Jiu, who was leaning on the table, was fast asleep. He stood quietly behind her, silent for a moment, and slowly stretched out a hand as if to rub her soft hair. The golden light from outside the window poured in, and the backs of the two were coated with a hazy soft light, making the scene look beautiful. The next second, the skin on her neck was covered with icy fingers. It's like having a snowball thrown through your shirt collar in winter. The bone-chilling cold freezes Ruan Jiu Jiu with a jolt that she almost jumped up from her chair. What are you doing? Ruan Jiu Jiu was furious. Chung Jun. To wake you up. Ruan Jiu Jiu. This dog man still eats junk food to death. Chung Jun was beaten before he came out of Ruan Jiu Jiu's office. Ruan Jiu Jiu really didn't understand why he's always looking for trouble. When they bumped into Guyu, whom they had not seen for a long time, they looked at each other. Guyu smiled slightly embarrassedly, trying to find a topic to break the tension between them. I'm here to see Mr. Tu. Chung Jun put his hand in his pocket and brushed past him Jawai, with an expression that he, CJ, was too lazy to listen to him. Guyu. It seems that once again he had been ignored. She was busy with work in the afternoon, and Ruan Jiu Jiu didn't have time to go out. After work, she glanced at her phone. She estimated that she could still buy cakes at this point, so she asked Chung Jun to wait for her in front of the company so that on the way, the two of them could drop by a nearby restaurant to eat. They were currently in the mid-spring season, and the strong winds blowing every 2 to 3 days made Ruan Jiu Jiu shiver, and felt a deep chill. Wearing a hat and a mask, she quickly walked into the cake shop and bought a piece of cream mousse, a piece of half-cooked cheese, and a piece of milk crepe cake. After the clerk packed it up, Ruan Jiu Jiu carried a few pieces of cupcakes, hummed a song, and walked happily towards the direction of the company. At this time she heard the noise of people talking from a distance. Just at the gate of Jiaqing, some pedestrians were scattered, but only a few meters away, a red car crashed into a street light. The front of the car was dented, and the ground was full of debris, desolate and miserable. Ruan Jiu Jiu instantly thought of the fear of almost getting into a car accident that night. Her heart beat faster and inexplicably, there was panic gripping her heart. Her footsteps unconsciously quickened, and she became more and more flustered as she walked until finally, she simply trotted forward. It's too tragic. If you get hit like this, either you die or lose half of your life. It can't be Jiaqing's employee who had a car accident at the gate. Looks like a young guy. That's... Ruan Jiu Jiu's legs were softened, she squeezed in quickly, and finally saw what kind of scene it was. The man lying on the ground had fallen into a coma, covered in blood. His sweater was dyed red. The black down jacket had several holes scraped out, and the white fluff was squeezed out. He was tall and thin, and his black curly hair was scattered, blocking his face. How could Ruan Jiu Jiu forget that Chung Jun came to her office wearing such a suit today? She lost her strength and fell to her knees. She hurriedly took out her mobile phone and dialed 120 for emergency assistance. She was so flustered that even her fingers were trembling, and a great sadness surged from her chest, making Ruan Jiu Jiu's hands numb, unable to speak and tears sliding down her cheeks. When the call was answered, Ruan Jiu Jiu's voice was already crying. She cried and said the coordinates, location, begging them to come over quickly. The injured man was dying. Ruan Jiu Jiu's cries were so obvious in the chatter that the people around couldn't help but continue to talk sympathetically. It's a family member of the injured person, probably his girlfriend. It's too pitiful. Alas. Tunan went out with Chungjun. Chungjun looked as if he was too lazy to pay attention to him. Tian. But Tunan said happily beside him, I'm telling you I might be in love too. Chungjun ignored him and put on his earphones instead. Boss, you're not even curious. Boss, please ask me quickly, it's not easy for me. Tunan said eagerly. I think my secretary is secretly in love with me, you know? It's because I'm so emotionally retarded that I didn't realize that she has such deep feelings for me. Chungjun changed the song, and the heavy metal music suppressed Tunan's voice. Tunan cried and grimaced. He also wants to talk about his psychological journey. When the two came out of the gate, they saw a group of people surrounding the road, and at a glance they knew that it was the scene of a car accident. Among them, a wailing was very obvious, and people could not help but follow the sadness from it. Tunan couldn't help but take a second look. And then, Tunan. Huh? Isn't that sister-in-law? Chungjun took off his earphones and followed the direction Tunan was pointing at, and saw Ruan Jiu Jiu kneeling on the ground crying sadly in the crowd. Tunan. Chungjun. The author has something to say. Tunan. For whom is my sister-in-law crying? Chungjun. I also want to know. Recently, Ruan Jiu Jiu had strict requirements on Chungjun in terms of his daily routine and diet. She didn't plan to be so strict at first. She just wanted to raise the standard a little bit and waited for Chungjun to bargain. But after a few days, Chungjun seemed to be obedient. When Ruan Jiu Jiu would not allow him to eat, he wouldn't eat either. The number of retweets and likes on Ruan Jiu Jiu's private messages was going to explode, and her latest tweet had been flooded with comments below. Little Faria, why are you so cute? You look so good even when you cry, even though you only have a blurred side face. I'm in love. At Jiaqing, ask your boss to come out and fight me. This woman is mine. Ruan Jiu Jiu swiped down, and more comments were praising her or confessing to her. Seeing those, she didn't know whether to laugh or cry, and she simply turned off her phone. Who would have thought that today's controversy would extend to the current situation? Ruan Jiu Jiu didn't want to use other people's lives and deaths to stir up some publicity for herself, so she pretended not to see it, and ignored all kinds of comments. Chungjun walked out of the door, and from a distance he saw Ruan Jiu Jiu standing in place with a struggling face. With a natural expression he stepped forward and took Ruan Jiu Jiu's hand. Let's go. Where to? Go home. Chungjun's palm was dry and cold, and he held Ruan Jiu Jiu's hand tightly, making her unable to break free. She followed Chungjun out of the door in a confused manner. The two of them were walking one after the other when Ruan Jiu Jiu remembered something, and she tapped her head in annoyance. Ah, the cake was thrown on the ground. It was rare that Chungjun did not care about where the cake went. He walked ahead, always half a step faster than Ruan Jiu Jiu. He turned his back on Ruan Jiu Jiu and asked slowly, Why did you buy a cake? Ruan Jiu Jiu gave a dry cough. To reward you for your recent obedient performance. But you can't take advantage of the opportunity to mess around either. Chungjun continued to ask, Why were you crying? Ruan Jiu Jiu choked for a moment. This question came suddenly. She had thought that after a series of unexpected events, Chungjun would have long forgotten all about it. Remorse and embarrassment came to her mind when she thought of herself crying foolishly for a long time and being watched by Chungjun the whole time. Ruan Jiu Jiu's eyes flickered and she changed the subject. It's nothing. By the way, what's for dinner tonight? Originally, I wanted to go to the restaurant for dinner. Chungjun's footsteps were not fast and his voice was slow. There's a restaurant up ahead that tastes good. Oh, then let's go to that one. Ruan Jiu Jiu sighed silently in her heart after successfully avoiding that question. Sure enough, Chungjun, a dogman, couldn't think of anything else after hearing about eating, which was really a good habit. The sky was already dark. Chungjun held Ruan Jiu Jiu's hand silently, and she couldn't help but wonder when she actually stopped resisting holding hands with Chung Jun. For some reason she always felt that Chung Jun was acting weird. Was it just her hallucination? As Ruan Jiu Jiu pondered, a drop of water fell on the bridge of her nose. She sighed, raised her head, and the dense rain-like cow hair gradually became denser, drop by drop. Ruan Jiu Jiu squinted her eyes and said, "It's actually raining, ah. Quick, find a place to hide from the rain." Ruan Jiu Jiu tugged on Chung Jun's wrist and found that Chung Jun, who had been silent, was walking faster. She followed quickly, trotting as she walked. At this time Ruan Jiu Jiu panted and said, "Slow down a little bit, I can hardly keep up." Chung Jun's footsteps, however, did not slow down obediently. "Hey, Chung Jun! Chung Jun!" Chung Jun's footsteps became faster, so Ruan Jiu Jiu had to run, and her shoes made a thudding sound when she stepped on the wet ground. She began to feel a little pain in her arm from being pulled, and then Ruan Jiu Jiu froze and said, "Where are you taking me? Isn't the direction of the restaurant up ahead?" Not only did Chung Jun not continue walking toward the main road, but he also pulled Ruan Jiu Jiu to a small path. Ruan Jiu Jiu became even more flustered. Why does this look like she's going to get sold? Chung Jun? Chung! Chung Jun's footsteps stopped abruptly, and Ruan Jiu Jiu almost hit him with her head. When she raised her head, she saw that Chung Jun was looking at her fixedly. He was staring at Ruan Jiu Jiu, which made her feel uncomfortable. For a moment, Ruan Jiu Jiu almost thought that Chung Jun wanted to kill his wife and cheat her insurance. The rain dampened Chung Jun's hair. He took a step forward, forcing Ruan Jiu Jiu to step backward involuntarily until her back hit the wall. She admitted that she was a little cowardly. She was used to seeing the tired and lazy appearance of Chung Jun on weekdays, but this moment was very different. However, she couldn't tell exactly what was wrong. Chung Jun asked, "Why were you crying?" Ruan Jiu Jiu appeared tough on the surface but was actually panicking inside. She tried her best to widen her eyes and said with a stern face, "I'll cry if I want to. I have tear ducts, so why can't I just vent when I'm feeling emotional?" Chung Jun's warm voice was so clear in the drizzling rain of the night. "Was it because of me? That's why you were crying so hard as if the whole world was falling apart." Ruan Jiu Jiu jumped on immediately. "Don't ask, I did not cry for you, don't make a fool of yourself." The more Ruan Jiu Jiu opened her teeth and claws and bluffed, the more she could feel her lack of confidence. After saying this, Ruan Jiu Jiu suddenly realized that Chung Jun had been quietly watching her reaction. Her face flushed red. She didn't know whether it was because of embarrassment or some other inexplicable emotion. Ruan Jiu Jiu turned her face away and said stiffly, "I'm hungry and I'm leaving. You can stay here in the rain if you want." After she finished speaking, she took a step to the side, but the force on her wrist suddenly became stronger. Ruan Jiu Jiu was dragged back by Chung Jun the dogman, before she could take a second step. She was about to explode when she saw that warm and beautiful face was zooming in and taking up all of her vision. With Ruan Jiu Jiu's dazed expression, Chung Jun's low sigh sounded beside her ears, as if saying, "Forget it." "Forget about it? What forget?" Ruan Jiu Jiu's words failed to come out, and she was completely blocked by him. Her mind went blank for a moment, and she was shocked to the point that she was completely wooden. Ruan Jiu Jiu cried so much that her hands and feet became cold and her head became numb. The onlookers beside her were pitying her, and hearing their whispers made Ruan Jiu Jiu even sadder. Chung Jun left this world and she's all alone in this place, without close friends, relatives, and no one she could lean on together, as if the world changed from color to black and white in an instant. At such a moment, Ruan Jiu Jiu suddenly understood why Chung Jun had been living in a state of ignorance after his mother left, and did not cherish his body at all. He probably also thought that his life was meaningless. Such a feeling can only be truly felt at this time. Can a supporting role die so suddenly? Each of them is a living being. Chung Jun, your life is too miserable. She became sad again. The noisy crowd was quiet for a moment. Ruan Jiu Jiu sat paralyzed on the ground and saw a pair of black and white sneakers and black casual trousers. She wiped away her tears in surprise, raised her head with blurry eyes, and saw Chung Jun standing in front of her, looking down at her. His drooping eyelids were half closed, revealing a pair of dark eyes, and he stared at Ruan Jiu Jiu fixedly. There were still wet tears on her face, the tip of her nose was red, and she showed a weak expression that was rarely shown on her face. The two looked at each other. Chungjun said softly, "Why are you crying?" Ruan Jiu Jiu thought for a while that she was in a trance and her brain was hallucinating, until Chungjun bent his knees and squatted down under her blank stare. He stretched out his hand and wiped her tears with his fingers. The tears soaked his fingertips, and they were a bit scorching hot, even scalding the tip of his heart, and his fingertips could not help but shiver slightly and retracted. Chungjun looked at her and said slowly, "Don't cry, it's so ugly." Ruan Jiu Jiu felt the temperature of his skin with a dazed expression, and after a while her dull brain finally started to work. Ruan Jiu Jiu didn't care to wipe her tears. She asked in a hoarse voice, You're not dead?" Chungjun said seriously, "I haven't eaten the full-course meal you made." Hearing Chungjun's words, Ruan Jiu Jiu was both angry and amused, with mixed feelings in her heart, and she couldn't tell how it felt. She gritted her teeth, glared at Chungjun and said, "Don't even think about it." The 121 ambulance arrived before the couple argued about the full-course meal. "Are there any family members of the patient present?" "Yes." The melon-eating people too who were present responded one after another, pointing to Ruan Jiu Jiu who was sitting on the ground. The little girl RJJ cried for a long time. Look at that, her eyes were swollen like walnuts. Ruan Jiu Jiu, who was suddenly sober. Facing the emergency doctor's question, Ruan Jiu Jiu said dryly, Can she say that she made a mistake and cried here for nothing?" Chungjun said, "This is Jiaqing's employee and I am the boss." Ruan Jiu Jiu, that's good, hurry up and get in." The two got into the ambulance, leaving Tunan waiting for the police to arrive and deal with follow-up matters. As Ruan Jiu Jiu sat face-to-face with Chungjun, she asked, "How do you know that he is an employee of Jiaqing? Could it be that Chungjun's memory is so good that he even remembers what the other person looks like?" Chungjun said slowly, "The clothes arrived at the company yesterday, and I stopped by and asked for a set." Ruan Jiu Jiu, ? They often buy clothes in groups, which is convenient and hassle-free. It was understandable why Ruan Jiu Jiu didn't have any impressions. Usually, her social circle was mainly among Lao Meng, Tunan, and Chungjun. It was pointless to mention Chungjun after all, that guy wore sweaters all the time. Tunan was more showy. He always wore suits due to his work. Lao Meng likes to dress up and has never worn a sweater, resulting in Ruan Jiu Jiu having no idea about other people's clothes. Ruan Jiu Jiu covered her face. So that's how it is. The rescue was timely, and the injury was not too serious. The injured were finally rescued after a few hours. Although Ruan Jiu Jiu didn't know the other person, looking at the miserable scene she felt somewhat the same. Hearing the doctor say that the rescue had come, she couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. That's great. The driver who caused the accident was also taken to the hospital for rescue. The driver's injuries were less severe, and he woke up not long after. However, at the same time, he is about to face the price of his drunk driving crime. Chungjun paid the cost of treatment in advance. Ruan Jiu Jiu waited patiently in the corridor, turned on her phone and scrolled through it. "Tunan, sister-in-law, you're on fire again." "Ruan Jiu Jiu?" "Tunan, look at the hot search." Ruan Jiu Jiu hurriedly opened her Weibo account, and the topic #Jiaqing's good treatment of employees was soaring to the first place, with a faint tendency of exploding. She opened the topic, and the first thing that caught her eye was a video forwarded by a big V. The video was taken by a passerby, in which the injured person was carried on a stretcher, and Ruan Jiu Jiu and Chungjun said they were family members and got on the ambulance one after the other. The caption of Big V's Bohemian laughing point is Low 5. Post reads, "A company employee has a car accident, and the boss personally escorts him. Only Jiaqing has this kind of treatment." According to the people at the scene, the boss's wife was in tears. "I hope my boss can cry for me once. Smile/smile. The tweet was retweeted by hundreds of thousands, and the comments and likes soared. Other Weibo accounts also praised Jiaqing for being humane and benevolent. Jiaqing's boss doesn't need to make an image just to earn favorability. On the contrary, after the identity of the real boss and the boss wife were exposed, they had been keeping a low profile, as if they didn't exist, and the favorability of passersby was very high. Immediately afterward, some employees of Jiaqing posted their own benefits, like the delicious food of the canteen chef, and said that Jiaqing's benefits were much better than they thought, which made netizens feel envy and hate. This is awesome. It's a place like heaven. The number of retweets and likes on Ruan Jiu Jiu's private messages was going to explode, and her latest tweet had been flooded with comments below. Little Feria, why are you so cute? You look so good even when you cry, even though you only have a blurred side face. I'm in love. At Jiaqing, ask your boss to come out and fight me. This woman is mine. Ruan Jiu Jiu swiped down, and more comments were praising her or confessing to her. Seeing those, she didn't know whether to laugh or cry, and she simply turned off her phone. Who would have thought that today's controversy would extend to the current situation? Ruan Jiu Jiu didn't want to use other people's lives and deaths to stir up some publicity for herself, so she pretended not to see it and ignored all kinds of comments. Chang Jun walked out of the door, and from a distance he saw Ruan Jiu Jiu standing in place with a struggling face. With a natural expression, he stepped forward and took Ruan Jiu Jiu's hand. Let's go. Where to? Go home. Chang Jun's palm was dry and cold, and he held Ruan Jiu Jiu's hand tightly, making her unable to break free. She followed Chang Jun out of the door in a confused manner. The two of them were walking one after the other when Ruan Jiu Jiu remembered something, and she tapped her head in annoyance. Ah, the cake was thrown on the ground. It was rare that Chang Jun did not care about where the cake went. He walked ahead, always half a step faster than Ruan Jiu Jiu. He turned his back on Ruan Jiu Jiu and asked slowly, "Why did you buy a cake?" Ruan Jiu Jiu gave a dry cough. "To reward you for your recent obedient performance. But you can't take advantage of the opportunity to mess around either." Chang Jun continued to ask, "Why were you crying?" Ruan Jiu Jiu choked for a moment. This question came suddenly. She had thought that after a series of unexpected events, Chang Jun would have long forgotten all about it. Remorse and embarrassment came to her mind when she thought of herself crying foolishly for a long time and being watched by Chang Jun the whole time. Ruan Jiu Jiu's eyes flickered and she changed the subject. "It's nothing. By the way, what's for dinner tonight?" "Originally, I wanted to go to the restaurant for dinner." Chang Jun's footsteps were not fast and his voice was slow. "There's a restaurant up ahead that tastes good." "Oh, then let's go to that one." Ruan Jiu Jiu sighed silently in her heart after successfully avoiding that question. Sure enough, Chang Jun, a dogman, couldn't think of anything else after hearing about eating, which was really a good habit. The sky was already dark. Chang Jun held Ruan Jiu Jiu's hand silently, and she couldn't help but wonder when she actually stopped resisting holding hands with Chang Jun. For some reason, she always felt that Chang Jun was acting weird. Was it just her hallucination? As Ruan Jiu Jiu pondered, a drop of water fell on the bridge of her nose. She sighed, raised her head, and the dense rain-like cow hair gradually became denser, drop by drop. Ruan Jiu Jiu squinted her eyes and said, "It's actually raining, ah. Quick, find a place to hide from the rain." Ruan Jiu Jiu tugged on Chang Jun's wrist and found that Chang Jun, who had been silent, was walking faster. She followed quickly, trotting as she walked. At this time, Ruan Jiu Jiu panted and said, "Slow down a little bit, I can hardly keep up." Chang Jun's footsteps, however, did not slow down obediently. "Hey, Chang Jun! Chang Jun!" Chang Jun's footsteps became faster, so Ruan Jiu Jiu had to run, and her shoes made a thudding sound when she stepped on the wet ground. She began to feel a little pain in her arm from being pulled, and then Ruan Jiu Jiu froze and said, "Where are you taking me? Isn't the direction of the restaurant up ahead?" Not only did Chang Jun not continue walking toward the main road, but he also pulled Ruan Jiu Jiu to a small path. Ruan Jiu Jiu became even more flustered. Why does this look like she's going to get sold? Chang Jun? Chang! Chang Jun's footsteps stopped abruptly, and Ruan Jiu Jiu almost hit him with her head. When she raised her head, she saw that Chang Jun was looking at her fixedly. He was staring at Ruan Jiu Jiu, which made her feel uncomfortable. For a moment, Ruan Jiu Jiu almost thought that Chang Jun wanted to kill his wife and cheat her insurance. The rain dampened Chang Jun's hair. He took a step forward, forcing Ruan Jiu Jiu to step backward involuntarily until her back hit the wall. She admitted that she was a little cowardly. She was used to seeing the tired and lazy appearance of Chang Jun on weekdays, but this moment was very different. However, she couldn't tell exactly what was wrong. Chang Jun asked, "Why were you crying?" Ruan Jiu Jiu appeared tough on the surface but was actually panicking inside. She tried her best to widen her eyes and said with a stern face, "I'll cry if I want to. I have tear ducts, so why can't I just vent when I'm feeling emotional?" Chungjun's warm voice was so clear in the drizzling rain of the night. "Was it because of me? That's why you were crying so hard as if the whole world was falling apart." Ruan Jiu Jiu jumped on immediately. "Don't ask, I did not cry for you, don't make a fool of yourself." The more Ruan Jiu Jiu opened her teeth and claws and bluffed, the more she could feel her lack of confidence. After saying this, Ruan Jiu Jiu suddenly realized that Chungjun had been quietly watching her reaction. Her face flushed red. She didn't know whether it was because of embarrassment or some other inexplicable emotion. Ruan Jiu Jiu turned her face away and said stiffly, "I'm hungry and I'm leaving. You can stay here in the rain if you want." After she finished speaking, she took a step to the side, but the force on her wrist suddenly became stronger. Ruan Jiu Jiu was dragged back by Chungjun the dogman, before she could take a second step. She was about to explode when she saw that warm and beautiful face was zooming in and taking up all of her vision. With Ruan Jiu Jiu's dazed expression, Chungjun's low sigh sounded beside her ears, as if saying, "Forget it." "Forget about it? What forget?" Ruan Jiu Jiu's words failed to come out, and she was completely blocked by him. Ruan Jiu Jiu was dumbfounded. She could almost clearly feel Chungjun's breath blowing on her cheeks, as if an air conditioner was on the hottest air level, blowing her cheeks red and her ears flushed. The touch on her lips was soft and real, and she realized what had happened to them after a second thought. Ruan Jiu Jiu's body was as stiff as a block of wood, and she didn't dare to move, as if a huge propeller were whistling through the sky, and all that was left in her head was a buzzing sound. She struggled for a bit, but was caught in the waist by Chungjun and couldn't move. How can Chungjun, this dogman, be so powerful? Ruan Jiu Jiu felt the sky spinning for a while, almost suffocating her. Chungjun didn't go any further, just rested on her lips for a moment, then left her lips and slowly removed his hand. There was still a faint warmth on his lips. The rain was getting heavier, and this spring rain came in a haste just like Ruan Jiu Jiu's mood at this moment. She didn't dare to look up, because she knew that Chungjun had been looking at her, and Ruan Jiu Jiu was not ready for their relationship to come to this point. There was a silent atmosphere between the two. Raindrops hit the walls and the muddy ground with a crackling sound. Chungjun's voice came from above her head. "You!" Ruan Jiu Jiu was inexplicably nervous. "What? Did you by any chance steal a cream puff?" Ruan Jiu Jiu? She did buy a few cream puffs on the way while buying a cake, and ate them before leaving. As for how Chungjun discovered it, probably from the sweet taste of cream lingering on her lips. Chungjun sighed and said quietly, "Sure enough, it was stealing." Ruan Jiu Jiu. This bastard, could it be? In order to check whether she stole food or not, he pressed her and kissed her. That's definitely it. Ruan Jiu Jiu was speechless as if she had been deceived. "You! Let's go." He interrupted her. Chungjun held her wrist and took Ruan Jiu Jiu out of the remote path, seemingly stable on the surface. Disturbed by the brief intervention, Ruan Jiu Jiu almost forgot about the kiss. The two ate in harmony, and neither of them mentioned the matter again. Chungjun and Ruan Jiu Jiu got wet from the rain, and the air conditioner in the restaurant failed to warm her up. When they came out of the restaurant, facing the cold wind, Ruan Jiu Jiu sneezed suddenly and then shivered. "It's so cold, we better take a taxi back." Chungjun said, "I'm wearing a down jacket." Ruan Jiu Jiu, who thought he was going to take off his clothes for her, quickly waved her hand. "No need, it will be warm in the car later." Chungjun paused, and when he looked at Ruan Jiu Jiu, a look of "what are you thinking" was written all over his face. "I mean, the down jacket is very warm, so you can have a set next time." One Ruan Jiu Jiu. Chungjun. Question mark. Chungjun got into the private car after being hit with a hammer too. This jerk really didn't have any ounce of desire to live. Ruan Jiu Jiu looked back on it, and thought that she may have been possessed to have been taken advantage of by Chungjun. She should have sent him flying to heaven with a punch when he had an evil intention, so that he could realize how inappropriate his actions were. The rain was getting heavier, and the air was filled with a damp earthy smell, mixed with the smell of fresh willow branches. The raindrops fell on the ground, like Yipping and Shuhuang kissing in the rain, and their clothes were wet. Ruan Jiu Jiu changed her shoes and said, Shu Huan. Chung Jun. Who did you call? Ruan Jiu Jiu. Sorry, I spoke without thinking. Her whole body was cold, and her bones seemed to be immersed in cold water. Ruan Jiu Jiu shivered and pulled his jacket, but Chung Jun held onto it and wouldn't let go. Who is Shu Huan? Ruan Jiu Jiu. What do you mean? You haven't watched Romance in the Rain? Why did you call his name? I just misspoke. Why did you misspoke? Ruan Jiu Jiu could neither laugh nor cry. Do you want to compete with a TV character? Chung Jun. You're guilty. Ruan Jiu Jiu? Sometimes she really doesn't understand Chung Jun's logic. What's wrong with him? Ruan Jiu Jiu said gloomily. I'm not going to bother with you. I'm going to take a hot bath, otherwise I will catch a cold. In the next second, Ruan Jiu Jiu saw the reality of this world. She watched helplessly as Chung Jun, this dog man, retreated, and was several meters away from her in an instant. Under Ruan Jiu Jiu's death stare, Chung Jun said calmly, Don't infect me. Is this something a person can say? Ruan Jiu Jiu admitted that her rebellious attitude was quite serious, so she reacted very quickly to take revenge. She took a shower and went out. Chung Jun was sitting on the sofa watching TV. While he was watching TV, Ruan Jiu Jiu quietly turned down the temperature of the air conditioner, deliberately turned on the cold air, and wrapped herself in thick clothes. Chung Jun looked like he didn't notice and continued to watch TV. After a while, he realized that something was wrong. The temperature in the room is a bit low. Where is the remote control for the air conditioner? Ruan Jiu Jiu. Don't increase the temperature. I think it's just right. Chung Jun. I'll go back to my room. Don't you dare go back and try. Chung Jun was quiet for a moment, then said slowly, Are you taking revenge on me? Ruan Jiu Jiu refused to admit. There is no such thing. If you want me to catch a cold, this way is too inefficient. Ruan Jiu Jiu. Huh. Chung Jun turned his face away and suggested seriously, How about thinking of a more effective way? With this more effective way, when Ruan Jiu Jiu understood what Chung Jun meant within a few seconds, her eyes went black. The scene in front of her was upside down in an instant, and her back hit the soft sofa cushion. Ruan Jiu Jiu was hopelessly discouraged. She weakly said, It's better to turn up the temperature, it's not good to catch a cold. He rested his elbows on the sofa, grabbed Ruan Jiu Jiu's wiggly wrist, and chose to go directly and kiss her lips. Lips were touching, and the intimate yet inexperienced touch made Chung Jun's throat let out a low sigh. This time he didn't just taste it lightly, but tasted her lips little by little, like eating a small piece of strawberry cake, like soft marshmallows but softer than marshmallows, sweeter than macarons but not greasy at all. With the weakness she rarely shows, he couldn't help but bite her lips a little bit out of control. Ruan Jiu Jiu almost thought she was going to be eaten. As if it was food, he ate it slowly and wiped it clean. She let out a low gasping sound, which was quickly engulfed by the intense exchange of lips and teeth. His rusty movements at the beginning became more and more familiar. Ruan Jiu Jiu had no room to struggle at all, and she was almost out of breath when he kissed her. Her chest rose and fell violently, and even through the thick clothes, she could still feel Chung Jun's body heat. Gradually, the icy cold wind could no longer be felt, and the hot and sluggish breathing made their whole body feel hot. Ruan Jiu Jiu was kissed with a red face and thought vaguely, Can saliva transmission cause others to catch a cold? Why does she always feel like she was being taken advantage of? In the middle of the night, the room rang with the sound of the door being pushed open, and two people came out of two rooms. Foreheads were hot, and steps were weak. The two sat on the sofa and sink, and picked up the thermometer and clipped it in place. Chung Jun. Ugh. Ruan Jiu Jiu. Ugh. A high fever lasted until midnight and then cleared up. Luckily it was only a temporary cold. Ruan Jiu Jiu's emotions were very complicated. Thinking of the kiss last night, she was still a little embarrassed to see Chung Jun, but because the two of them caught cold and fever, in addition to embarrassment, it added a bit of indescribable funny atmosphere. Ruan Jiu Jiu covered her face. Other people's relationships are sweet. So, how do they both always stir up trouble and accidents? At this time, Chung Jun came out of his study and had already changed his clothes. It's a black down jacket again, but the sweater inside was changed into a light gray color, and there was a cute little octopus logo on the chest. This wonderful and lively style of the picture was definitely not the clothes that Chang-jun would buy himself. His style was almost solid colors based on black, white, and gray. There were no patterns or color schemes. The style was casual and uncharacteristic, which was very casual to the public. If it weren't for that face that could bring disaster to the country and the people, he would definitely be a very simple and sociable coder. It's the company's clothes again. Yeah, do you want it? No. Chang-jun asked slowly. Let's go. Oh, okay. Ruan Jiu Jiu coughed dryly as if nothing had happened. She picked up her bag and followed Chang-jun out the door. The two sat in the back row. Ruan Jiu Jiu looked down at her phone, and just after a day, the number of her followers on Weibo increased by hundreds of thousands, and the number of retweets and likes and private messages was about to explode. Ruan Jiu Jiu had no choice but to set all notifications to no notifications. The brother driver played soft music. The car window was opened by a crack. Ruan Jiu Jiu looked out the window, and the cold wind blew on her face. As if overnight everything was renewed, the streets were lined with green bushes to add a little greenery. The slender and upright seedlings stretched their branches and leaves, and the buds were brewing, waiting for spring. Ruan Jiu Jiu took a deep breath and narrowed her eyes. That's great, spring is here again. Autumn is the most dreaded when you live alone, even though winter is the longest. She has been living with Chang-jun for a long time, and she has encountered a lot of things, but surprisingly hasn't paid much attention to the changes in seasons. She didn't know if this was a good thing or a bad thing, and Ruan Jiu Jiu herself can't tell. Chang-jun said, in 2 weeks the apricot and cherry blossoms will all bloom. Do you want to go to the flower show? Ruan Jiu Jiu froze for a moment, and then responded with a smile. Okay. Speaking of which, the two of them have not been on a serious date so far. Chang-jun actually offered to go out for a walk instead of staying at home and being a salted fish one, which can be said to be a very progressive move. Ruan Jiu Jiu looked back and smiled. A pair of affectionate peach blossom eyes curved into a beautiful arc. The ends of the eyes were slightly raised, and the eyes were dark and shining as if thousands of stars were sleeping in them, and because of the happy mood, they sparkled with brilliance. His eyes fell on her soft pink lips. Eat marrow and know the taste. Chang-jun suddenly realized what kind of torturous mood was behind this phrase. He took hold of Ruan Jiu Jiu's hand. Her fingers were so soft and could be easily gathered in his palm. Under Ruan Jiu Jiu's dumbfounded gaze, he slowly stepped forward. Then Ruan Jiu Jiu slapped him on the face. Ruan Jiu Jiu's face was expressionless. You'll catch a cold, don't touch me. The driver in the front row couldn't hold back and made a very light sound as if trying to hold back his laughter. The whole person was like a wind-up doll, clicking and shaking up and down. Chang-jun. Aware of the boss's death stare, the driver silently shut his mouth and adjusted the car partition in the middle of the 2 rows to cover their figures. Ruan Jiu Jiu said that she was very vengeful. This dogman, afraid of catching a cold and not touching her, kissed her again in order to get sick together. She had a grudge against Chang-jun's behavior. Until she forgives him, he won't be able to touch her a bit. The door of the company elevator opened. Ruan Jiu Jiu took a step first, and Chang-jun followed quietly behind her. They encountered company staff on the way who all nodded cautiously. In less than half an hour, the company gossip was circulated among each other. The big boss is henpecked 3. The lady boss walked in front without turning her head back, so handsome. TSK TSK TSK. I guess he knelt on the remote control last night, for if Ruan Jiu Jiu heard the rumors, she would probably be depressed to death. She just walked in front of Chang-jun, so how could there be so many strange rumors? When Ruan Jiu Jiu entered the office, Chang-jun followed very naturally, and was stopped by Ruan Jiu Jiu at the door. What are you doing? Just walking around. Ruan Jiu Jiu. Go back to your office. Chang-jun showed by himself what it means to stay rooted and not move. The two were at a standstill when Tu Nan's voice was heard from far away. Let's have dinner together tonight? This was Tu Nan's question. Not eating. This was the little secretary's cold answer. I know you're shy. It's okay. Boss, this is sexual harassment in the workplace. Do you need me to educate you about it? Tu Nan choked. The little secretary, who always follows beside him with a look of indifference, copied Tu Nan's usual venomous tongue towards his competitors. Is it because the boss had not any sexual partner for a long time and is having a hard time releasing dopamine 5? Your sperm brain should also be rational, and don't treat me like other women who can say whatever they want. I hope you can restrain yourself during the working period, otherwise, I will consider the high salary that the headhunter 6 gave me last night. Tunan was shocked. A headhunter poached you? The salary is very high? I'll give you a raise, it's not a problem. The little secretary shook her head. Although the salary is good, it won't be enough to poach me. Tunan breathed a sigh of relief. That's good. What makes my heart move is that their boss's IQ and EQ are quite on line 7. Tunan took a long time to react after he was scolded by the little secretary when they turned a corner. His face was blue and white. The secretary gave him a sidelong glance, and left first without giving him any face. Tunan? What dignity did he have as a boss? Even his own secretary can mock him, what else can he say? The place where the two were talking was not far from Ruan Jiu Jiu's office, and Ruan Jiu Jiu listened enough before pushing open the door and walking out asking, "What's the matter with you?" Tunan was like a fellow villager seeing another fellow villager. With tears in his eyes, he grabbed Ruan Jiu Jiu's arm and pulled her back to her office. As soon as he entered the door, he bumped into the boss who was sitting in the office, and Tunan immediately became embarrassed. As soon as Tunan entered the door too, Chungjun stared directly at the place where Tunan was holding Ruan Jiu Jiu's arm, and that look reminded Tunan of his fear of working overtime. Tunan quickly let go. He had already offended the secretary today, and if he offends another boss, he will not be able to live this day. Ruan Jiu Jiu put her hands on his thin shoulders in a funny way and asked, "So what the hell were you doing just now?" Tunan said with a gloomy face, "It's just a normal interaction between men and women." "No, sister-in-law, you don't know, I haven't had time to talk to you yet. I wanted to talk to you yesterday to discuss the specifics of the drama. But when I saw you kneeling on the ground crying." "Okay, please skip that part, thank you." Ruan Jiu Jiu shows a fake smile. Tunan didn't realize that he had offended the boss wife too. He touched the top of his head and said, "I just found out that my secretary has a crush on me." Ruan Jiu Jiu. Faced with Ruan Jiu Jiu's big reaction, Tunan was even more aggrieved. "Sister-in-law, what is with your reaction? Is there anything wrong with what I said?" Ruan Jiu Jiu. Yes, you continue. "Anyway, I found that she pays attention to me. Not only at work but also in life. I went on a blind date twice last week, and she wasn't happy about it and gave me the cold shoulder for a day or so. Also, she always intentionally gets my attention, and then pretends that she doesn't care with an opposite attitude. Other than that, Ruan Jiu Jiu remembered Tunan's 2 blind dates. He threw a negotiation assignment to the secretary, which caused the secretary's plan to take a leave of absence to fail, and the little girl's face was full of dissatisfaction. After listening to Tunan's various proofs, Ruan Jiu Jiu was very sure that this guy was probably single for too long, and had a delusion called the opposite email protected looked at me, and I'll think of what would be the best name for our child. These are all one-sided feelings of Tunan. Ruan Jiu Jiu asked patiently, "So is there any concrete evidence that she had ever confessed to you?" At the mention of this, Tunan's eyes lit up. "There is. Last time he was a little tired and fell asleep on his desk for a while. The secretary reminded him that there would be a meeting in half an hour, and then Tunan sat up straight. At this time, he and the little secretary met each other's eyes, and he could clearly see that the often cold eyes had a shy smile. She pursed her lips slightly, and she still wanted to speak. "Boss." Tunan's heart skipped a beat. As a result, we were interrupted by the phone, and I was really pissed off. Besides confession, do you think there was another reason at that time? Ruan Jiu Jiu. That day, if she remembered correctly. At that time, she happened to go out of Chungjun's office when she bumped into Tunan's secretary. The little girl burst into laughter for a long time. Ruan Jiu Jiu couldn't help but ask a question. Then the secretary looked at her and said with a smile, "Boss too slept while laying down for a while, and when he sat up there was a round watch mark on his forehead. He looks especially like Erlang Shan for." Looking at Tunan with a rippling expression in front of her, Ruan Jiu Jiu really couldn't bear to hurt him. "This is all your one-sided idea. If you can't be sure, talking to the secretary like this is sexual harassment and an office romance." Tunan said with a smug face, She will definitely confess to me. Ruan Jiu Jiu, I wish you good luck. Now that Tunan is here, Ruan Jiu Jiu forcibly pushed Chungjun toward Tunan and told the big boss to stop staying in her office and disturbing her peace of mind. There was still a lot of work today, and Ruan Jiu Jiu was not in the mood to argue with them. At this time, Ruan Jiu Jiu suddenly understood the feelings of Tunan's secretary. When she can't get away, she always wants to smash a man's dog head with a hammer 6. She wonders how long Tunan's daydreaming would last. Ruan Jiu Jiu was rushing to work when the door was pushed open, and it was Lao Meng who came in. Ruan Jiu Jiu glanced sideways at him and said, "Is something wrong?" Lao Meng said with a smile, "Today's Jiu Jiu is still a diligent Jiu Jiu. If you have something to say, say it. This is about you first. You little girl, why didn't you tell me when you made a set of souvenirs? My wife liked it and said she wanted to invite you to draw a copy of the original." "Huh? Souvenirs?" Ruan Jiu Jiu looked at Lao Meng blankly. Lao Meng shook a keychain in his hand. It was a small ice sculpture of the image of a heroine. It was exquisitely crafted and vivid, about the length of a finger. The souvenir was officially announced by Jiaqing today, and it was also posted on Weibo. At the artist is a stupid bird that flies first 7. Ruan Jiu Jiu was busy with her drafts, so she naturally didn't notice it. She looked at the small ice sculpture. She was surprised and delighted that Chungjun turned it into a keychain. Looking back, Ruan Jiu Jiu thought it was a pity that the ice sculpture stayed too short, but now it is better, and it will be preserved forever. It turned out that Chungjun asked for her photos for such a purpose. Her heart warmed as she took the keychain and shook it. "It's so pretty. One more thing." "What?" "If you have time, there will be a small gathering the day after tomorrow. All attendees are colleagues. Some of them are my friends. I will take you to meet the outside world." Ruan Jiu Jiu was flattered. Is this okay? Just remember to dress up beautifully." Lao Meng patted Ruan Jiu Jiu's head with a smile, like treating his own child. "It's nice. If it wasn't for my wife's health, I would also want a daughter. That stinky boy in my family is no fun at all." Hearing Lao Meng's words, Ruan Jiu Jiu couldn't laugh nor cry. How can you use the word fun in describing your children? Also, I'm not young anymore. Recently, her hair has grown a bit longer, so Ruan Jiu Jiu used a small rubber band to tie a small bundle at the back of her head, looking more and more like a young and playful schoolgirl. As a result, the originally normal everyone looked at Ruan Jiu Jiu, and the big boss in their minds became a rich man with potentially peculiar hobbies. Ruan Jiu Jiu was naturally very grateful to be brought to the party by Lao Meng. In this circle, she had no place to stand, and it was Lao Meng who brought her in step by step. Ruan Jiu Jiu said seriously, "Thank you." "Hey, don't be so polite." The ice sculpture souvenir was hung on the phone by Ruan Jiu Jiu, and the little figure was dangling in front of her, with a full sense of existence, which caused Ruan Jiu Jiu's anger at Chungjun to disappear. She thought that Chungjun was a bit of a dog sometimes, but it wasn't without merit, and his sincere surprise could impress her very much. Chungjun was sitting on the sofa, and out of the corner of his eye, he caught a glimpse of Ruan Jiu Jiu smiling. She seems to be in a good mood since she came back. Ruan Jiu Jiu noticed his gaze and waved the keychain on her phone. "I'll take this as your gift for me, thank you." It seems she can be happy with such small things. Chungjun put his hands on the back of his head as if he was watching TV, but because of Ruan Jiu Jiu's good mood, he also subtly became happier. He said slowly, "So when are you going to give me a gift?" The promised birthday gift was ruined by this guy. After promising a reward for his performance, the cake was thrown at the site of the car accident and was lost. Chungjun asked righteously, but Ruan Jiu Jiu said irritably, "I gave you a gift." Although it was only a small token of appreciation, she liked the small stone she brought back, and she also had a stone bracelet on her wrist. Chungjun. Ruan Jiu Jiu. Chungjun. Facing his bewildered stare, Ruan Jiu Jiu sneered and said, "You don't by any chance forget the little stones I gave you." Chungjun looked like he was trying to remember, and after a while he asked hesitantly, "Sheep dung balls. Mention sheep dung balls again or I will flip out." "Thank you. Your friend Grumpy Ruan Jiu Jiu is now online. She really can't expect this dogman to show what it means to be romantic." Ruan Jiu Jiu glared angrily and began to interrogate Chungjun. "The sheep dung ball I gave you, poo. The little stone I gave you, You better not have thrown it away. Chung Jun said seriously. Do you need me to look for it? Ruan Jiu Jiu. Why don't you throw yourself away? But to blame Chung Jun just because of a small stone was quite unnecessary. If he loses it, he loses it, and Chung Jun doesn't like wearing jewelry, so it's a matter of course that he doesn't take it to heart. It's just that she felt a little lost in her heart, and her feelings were casually discarded as if they were not even cared for. But thinking about it, Chung Jun didn't like her at that time, so wouldn't it be normal to throw it aside? Ruan Jiu Jiu placated herself and was finally comforted. Okay. Ruan Jiu Jiu stuffed her phone into her pocket. I'll go take a shower first. The muffled thunder outside was gradually growing. A gust of cold wind swept past, and it was estimated that there would be another light rain in the middle of the night. Recently, due to the weather, Ruan Jiu Jiu's wardrobe was a little humid, and when it would be sunny in a few days, she would dry her clothes out to dissipate the smell. Hot water splashed on the tiles, and the thick steam of the hot water was vaporizing, making people feel hot all over. Ruan Jiu Jiu unbuttoned her clothes and stood under the shower to take a bath. Her soft and fair body was tinted with a layer of pink, her legs were straight and slender, and her body proportions were excellent, a picture of a beauty bathing, but only the mirror can appreciate it. She lathered her hair and rubbed it. The fragrance of cherry blossoms was light and not very strong, and it smelled very comfortable. Ruan Jiu Jiu was filled with thoughts about the small party she would be attending the day after tomorrow, like how she should dress herself better. Wearing a long skirt? Would it be too deliberate? It doesn't seem to be formal to wear jeans. It seems that she still has to ask Lao Meng how to dress for such a party. With this in mind, Ruan Jiu Jiu raised her head and let the warm water fall on her face. The foam on her hair, like a silky cream mousse, slowly slid from the temples and dripped onto the fair and lustrous skin. Click. There was a faint sound like the sound of cutting off the electric current, and the warm light in the bathroom was instantly cut off, falling into a dead darkness. Ruan Jiu Jiu was startled and hurriedly turned off the shower. There was still foam on her face, so she quickly picked up a towel to wipe it, and asked Chung Jun loudly, "Is the power out? What's going on?" Across the door, Chung Jun said, "Don't be afraid, there's a power outage in the whole neighborhood." Ruan Jiu Jiu. The power didn't stop in the morning and at night but went out when she was in the middle of taking a shower. The bathroom was pitch dark, and because it suddenly turned from light to darkness, Ruan Jiu Jiu couldn't see anything, as if she was blind. Ruan Jiu Jiu took a step forward cautiously, and was not able to locate the place where the clothes were. At this moment, through the frosted glass of the bathroom door, a bright light suddenly illuminated half of the bathroom, so Ruan Jiu Jiu was able to see clearly. Across the door, Chung Jun's muffled and warm questioning voice came. "Can you see clearly?" "I can see clearly." With the help of Chung Jun's light, Ruan Jiu Jiu hurriedly washed the foam off her hair with water, then wiped off the water droplets on her body and changed her clothes. When she walked out the door, the room was dark and Chung Jun was leaning against the wall, one hand in his pocket and his other hand was using the mobile phone to illuminate the room for Ruan Jiu Jiu. Ruan Jiu Jiu asked bitterly, "When will the electricity come back?" Chung Jun said, "The electricity is being repaired, and it will probably take a few hours." The neighborhood was a little bit old, and it was quite normal that the equipment would occasionally not work properly. No one would probably have imagined that Jiaqing's boss and wife lived in a dilapidated little house that didn't quite fit in with them. Power outage means power outage. But it's too early, I can't sleep. Ruan Jiu Jiu paused for a while and then said, "How about we?" Chung Jun, who was leaning against the wall, stood up straight and his eyes lit up. "How about we watch a ghost movie? I have it on my laptop." Chung Jun. Watching ghost movies during a power outage was a very appropriate thing. Fortunately, the laptop was charged in advance, and it can probably last for a few hours, enough for them to watch a movie. In order to create some sort of ambience, Ruan Jiu Jiu collected all of Chung Jun's hidden snacks. Chung Jun, the party involved, did not dare to speak out, silently acted as a lighting staff, went and watched Ruan Jiu Jiu put the snacks on the coffee table in the living room. There was also cooked food that had not been eaten for a day or two that was kept in the refrigerator. Ruan Jiu Jiu simply took it out together. Ruan Jiu Jiu was busy going back and forth, Chung Jun was in charge of helping her get things, and it took a while to get ready. Ruan Jiu Jiu opened the laptop and asked Chung Jun casually, Which movie do you want to watch? Chung Jun looked faintly at Ruan Jiu Jiu opening the evilly drive. Opening the movies, horror movies. From top to bottom, the movies were categorized by nationality, which was extremely organized. It's up to you to choose from which country you want to watch. I've seen more than half of them. Ruan Jiu Jiu looked bold and generous as if she was treating a guest. Chung Jun. Generally speaking, Japan and South Korea should definitely be skipped. Even though he rarely watches horror movies, it doesn't mean he doesn't know. Europeans and Americans' ghosts and monsters tend to be on the gory and violent side, and they were also skipped. China. With his understanding of Ruan Jiu Jiu, it would be absolutely impossible that she would put some bad domestic films on the list. To sum up, using the elimination method to filter, Chung Jun's eyes finally fell on the word Thailand. In terms of language, Thai is softer and would likely hurt the ears less. In terms of popularity, Thai horror movies did not seem to be very well known, and they were almost unheard of in public ears. Of course, the public means him. Chung Jun said slowly, Thailand. Okay. Which one to watch? All the names look scary, so he just pointed to one. Shudder? You're lucky. Before Chung Jun could figure out whether Ruan Jiu Jiu's so-called luck was good or bad, the movie started. The huge living room was dark, and the curtains were pulled tightly. The two sat on the sofa, one was holding a pillow, and Ruan Jiu Jiu opened a bag of chocolates, broke it open and gave half of it to Chung Jun. The two stuffed chocolates into their mouths in sync and watched the movie quietly. The difference was that Ruan Jiu Jiu's body was leaning forward slightly, close to the screen, while Chung Jun's back was leaning on the sofa while hugging the pillow with a calm expression, an expression like he would never be frightened. In the dark living room, as if the movie had its own sound effects, the sound of music and voices were much louder than usual. Oh! Chung Jun was frightened by Ruan Jiu Jiu's scream that he staggered back, and the sofa made a thud sound. Ruan Jiu Jiu. What are you doing? Chung Jun. What are you screaming for? Ruan Jiu Jiu. Oh, I just suddenly remembered the scene of this movie later. I watched it long ago and forgot some details. Chung Jun. Keep watching, keep watching. I remember it will be very exciting later on. Ruan Jiu Jiu picked up some snacks and ate them all silently. She chewed the dried fruit and watched with great interest. The plot of the movie was getting more and more complicated, and more clues have come up that led to the truth. On the contrary, Chung Jun, who was sitting on the side, got rid of the half of the chocolate that Ruan Jiu Jiu handed him at the beginning, and kept holding a pillow and was sitting upright the whole time, with an unusually calm state on the surface. Unconsciously, he silently moved closer to Ruan Jiu Jiu. A hand was slowly placed on Ruan Jiu Jiu's arm. She was watching a horror movie when she suddenly jolted. Not to mention, with this kind of atmosphere, a hand touching her was really too stimulating. Ruan Jiu Jiu's body trembled for a moment, but then she saw that it was just Chung Jun's hand over her wrist and holding it. Ruan Jiu Jiu looked puzzled. What's wrong? Are you a little afraid? Chung Jun shook his head. I'm afraid that you'll be afraid. Ruan Jiu Jiu. Okay. Recalling his behavior in the haunted house, Chung Jun shouldn't be someone who is not afraid of ghosts. Ruan Jiu Jiu thought about it and decided that it was better if he got caught in his own self-delusion. The whole movie rendered a scary and terrifying atmosphere, which left people on edge, always prepared for a sudden attack. Fortunately, there weren't too many scary scenes. Ruan Jiu Jiu asked, Are you afraid? Chung Jun tried his best to calm down. It's okay. After saying that, he quietly sat beside Ruan Jiu Jiu and squeezed with her. Everyone's girlfriends would be scared and would squeeze into their boyfriend's arms. Chung Jun was very conscious, looking at Ruan Jiu Jiu just like a frightened bird. When the scene would be a little scary, he would stiffen up, as if he was going to stop breathing. The duration of the movie, which was originally thought to be long and torturous, turned out to be very fast because Ruan Jiu Jiu was by his side. It was about to end and Ruan Jiu Jiu couldn't take her eyes off it, but Chung Jun beside her realized that something was wrong. This movie. The sudden turn at the end of the movie was horrifying. Ruan Jiu Jiu calmly watched the ending but heard a rapid gasping sound beside her, which was very clear in the silent night. If the electricity was on at this time, she would definitely see that the pillow in Chung Jun's arms was almost strangled in half. Are you scared? No. Chung Jun's voice was steady. Ruan Jiu Jiu came to the idea of teasing CJ. She turned her face slowly, and under the light of the laptop, Ruan Jiu Jiu's cheeks were unnaturally bluish-white. Her hair was damp and scattered over her shoulders, and the two looked at each other. She said faintly, "Look, what's that on your shoulder?" Originally it was just a little joke, but just as Ruan Jiu Jiu's words fell, the lights in the room suddenly turned on. The next second, Ruan Jiu Jiu clearly saw Chang Jun's stiff and frightened expression. Those sleepy phoenix eyes that were usually half drooping were really huge, and Ruan Jiu Jiu's sympathetic face was reflected in his pupils. Boss Chang had been frightened to the point of losing the ability to manage his expressions. Ruan Jiu Jiu. Chang Jun. She didn't know why, but looking at Chang Jun's face that was scared to death. A cat with frizzy hair appeared in Ruan Jiu Jiu's mind, with ears pricked up. She thought that Chang Jun was really scared. Ruan Jiu Jiu was a little embarrassed for a while. She coughed dryly and said, just kidding, don't be afraid." Chang Jun's expression was stiff, and he probably hadn't recovered for a while. The laptop was turned off. He silently cleaned up the remaining garbage, silently put the rest of the snacks in the cabinet, and silently walked towards the study with the pillow in his arms. From beginning to end, not a word was said. Ruan Jiu Jiu thought that Chang Jun shouldn't be angry anymore. However, it was indeed easy to leave a psychological shadow on timid people who are easily intimidated. Ruan Jiu Jiu felt a little guilty and tried to make amends. Are you hungry? Would you like something to eat?" Chang Jun entered the door of the study without looking back. In the past, Chang Jun would absolutely forgive her by just mentioning food. In his mind, nothing was greater than food. Now, Chang Jun actually ignored her. Ruan Jiu Jiu now really realized the seriousness of the problem. She followed up. Chang Jun entered the study and glanced at her with a look of, "Why did you follow me in?" Ruan Jiu Jiu said shamelessly, "Are you sure you don't want to eat? I bought pasta yesterday so I can make spaghetti bolognese, as well as seafood spaghetti." Chang Jun's footsteps paused for a moment, and in Ruan Jiu Jiu's hopeful eyes he said, "Not eating. For the sake of good health." Ruan Jiu Jiu. Chang Jun, too, was probably the best at taking the hole she dug and letting her jump into it herself. Ruan Jiu Jiu asked, "Are you sure you don't want to eat? I'm hungry so I can make one for you on the way." "Not eating. Okay then." Ruan Jiu Jiu went out of the study and watched as Chang Jun closed the door of the study. She couldn't help but sigh. She should have known not to play with Chang Jun, and now it's not good. Since they met, this was the second time Chang Jun was angry with her. The first time Ruan Jiu Jiu didn't know the reason, but in the end, they resumed their friendly relationship because of a stolen takeout. But now that it's a relationship between a man and a woman, how do you fix it? Shouldn't it be a hug? A kiss? Ruan Jiu Jiu. Forget it, she will still tempt him with delicious food. How can she think about these things? It's not reliable. After all, Chang Jun had never played by the rules. With ready-made pasta, Ruan Jiu Jiu made the meat sauce, cooked the pasta, and the hot air warmed the whole kitchen. While carrying a plate of pasta, she quietly walked to the study and knocked on the door. Chang Jun. Chang Jun. The pasta's ready." Through the door, Chang Jun's voice was muffled. "I'm going to sleep." "Oh, okay. If you're hungry, just heat it up and eat it yourself." Ruan Jiu Jiu thought she was really screwed now. She doesn't know when Chang Jun will calm down. She held the plate of pasta in frustration and went back to her room to eat alone. At the same time, Chang Jun, who was lying on the bed, was looking at his mobile phone. The faint light of the phone was reflected on his silent face. The screen clearly shows a previously saved bookmark. It says, "The type of man that women dislike the most. 1. Timid and childish." The story has begun. Stay tuned to see how Ruan Jiu Jiu takes control of her fate. If you enjoyed this preview, don't forget to like, share, subscribe and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's next.